Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. If you are watching on YouTube, you can find out more about what we do at officehours.global. Our first hour is general discussion about media and virtual production. And our next hour is usually something we want to spend a little bit more time on. Today, we're going to give you an update about our coverage for NAMM and Cine and how it's coming together and what our plan is. A lot of what we're doing these days is open production. So we do a lot of things where we get to show you the back end of how it's actually working. And so this is part of that. And of course, we'll have the NAMM coverage coming up Saturday, Cinegear next Saturday, WWDC between it. So it's a busy time for us. So if you want to see more about our schedule, go to officehours.global. All right, let's go ahead and jump into the questions. Bill, what do we have?
Our first one comes from Adrian Albeck in Brisbane, Australia. He says the production backend for Tony Mobley's show is done on Vmix in the cloud. Is this hard to set up and replicate for an average streaming guy or girl?
Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, we did a whole series of second hours on how to set up Vmix in the cloud, and it would take quite a bit of brain power to learn how to do it. Fortunately, Jonas and Tucker, they started a new company that helps people set up these VPCs. The one for Tony's is pretty baseline of how we do these. It's a what we call a cutting machine. So that's the Vmix in the cloud machine. And then there's two NDI other machines that are, in this case, Zoom rooms. And so those feed the signals over. So last night we had 6 people, so you can get 3 per room. So we sent 3 NDIs, and then it was cut in the cloud in Vmix. And I'm not sure if they were using Stream Decks or not. If they're using Stream Decks, and there's a little bit of wizardry setting that up as well. But for the most part, that's it. It's just 3 AWS instances. Tucker, Jonas, Churig, they have some scripts that they've made that make it super easy. We can spin up these things in 15 minutes, which would take you 3 days. Because we've had to do 70 in a day, it makes it really easy when you just use CloudFormation to develop a script. But yeah, that's basically what it is. Zoom into Vmix.
I love the fact that we have companies starting to form from our from our members. You know, folks that have met each other on Office Hours and slowly start forming their own companies. So it's really exciting. Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, I just wanted to take a moment to congratulate Tony on his 50th show yesterday. And a bunch of us on Office Hours were featured there. It was a great show and great to see Tony, and hopefully another 50 or another 500.
Absolutely, Noah.
And I will mention I've hired Jonas and Tucker separately and together, and they've been awesome. So yes, please pursue that if you're interested.
Next question.
Next question comes to us from Graham Cardwell again in Belfast, Northern Ireland. A friend's son is getting married and her aged mother is unable to travel to the wedding. What are some minimum bandwidth requirements and so forth at the venue to facilitate a good stream? I'm helping at the mom's end. The platform still needs to be confirmed by the videographer.
Go ahead, Noah.
Yeah, I would do a minimum of 5 megabits per second upload speed. Download speed is what people tend to advertise, but that's kind of irrelevant for live streaming, right? Or less relevant, I should say, not irrelevant. I will also highly, highly recommend you figure out a hardline internet connection at the venue, or at least talk to them about that. I know a lot of people are on Wi-Fi and they think it's fine. It's really not fine for streaming. You need that when they're sending packets, like when we're sending stuff over streaming, you need that consistent, reliable internet connection.
Yeah. We usually lean around 10 megs up is usually what we say is the bare minimum of what we want. I feel a lot better at 15 or 20 megs up, but a lot of facilities have trouble with it. The other thing is just making sure that is not contested. You know, like there's a facility will have whatever it has, but it's got thousands of things that it wants to do with that bandwidth. So really think about what is going on at the facility. Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, we're starting to see folks using H.265, and as long as you can get H.265 up to where it can then be transcoded or to a place where it'll actually receive it, like YouTube won't receive that directly, so you have to do something. But we're seeing as low as 1.5 megabit for 1080p 30, so that's pretty crazy, because then you really only need double. So 3 would get you theoretically. I mean, I would want a minimum of 8 would be my number for 1080 if I'm going to do H.265. But yeah, if you got H.264, you're in for some little anomalies that might come across on the picture. So I'd look at also bonding if you possibly can, or worst case is even Zoom. I mean, as much as I hate to admit it, I'm going to live stream a funeral and it's just going to be Zoom webinar, and that way It just works. It's easy and it's secure.
Yeah, for streaming itself, the H265 is good. The other thing to think about is not just the number of pixels, but the quality of those pixels. And so if something is getting really beat up, it doesn't really matter if it's 1080p or not. So when we see lower bandwidths available to us, so when we go below 10, we usually start talking about 720p. That's going to drop your overall requirements a lot. And so that's going to be one of the things you may want to think about is going down to 720p if you don't have a lot of bandwidth. Another thing to think about is using something that uses Zixi. So that is, we use the elemental links because they're just built in and it goes to AWS. And the advantage of that is that Zixi is SRT is good, but when you get into low bandwidth, especially low fluctuating bandwidth, is where Zixi really stands out, and it just does a much better job than SRT of getting out of something. SRT is good as a mezzanine format in a largely stable and fairly well-built system. Zixi is really designed for when things are going bad. And so the one that's built in, I think teir has an option for it. Otherwise, almost everything's complicated except for the link. So to make that work. And so that's another thing for them. And that may be your videographer figuring that out. But when you think about bandwidth, it's more than just the speed. It's all the other pieces that are built around it. I do think that this is going to be a bigger market. We've done a variety of different weddings that we've streamed in different ways. And if you're thinking about it, it's a really great service to provide. We've done ones with wireless handhelds so that people that are remote can interact with the folks that are there and see what's going on and wandering through the crowd and seeing different things, and super successful. Like really, really, people are really excited about it. So we just want to think, especially nowadays, I think more and more people will not be traveling. I mean, the cost of travel is so high now that there's going to be a lot of weddings where people just aren't going to be able to make it financially. It's not even COVID anymore. And so I think that figuring out virtual solutions for funerals and weddings and all bar mitzvahs and bat mitzvahs and everything else is something that's going to be a growing business. Next question.
Next one comes to us from Noah Sargent in Fullerton, California, and he asks, do you have any hobbies outside of work? I feel it's a much needed break to go work in the garage with my hands, play music, and so forth.
Good, Bill.
I agree with you. It's important to have something else. Although I look back across the woof and warp of my life, and I've always had hobbies that I consider hobbies that are adjacent to what I do for a living. And let me be more specific. I produce video content for a living. I mean, that's what I do. Everything from meeting with clients, writing scripts, going out and shooting, doing the post, and delivering to them. So there's a lot of different specialties within that, right? We have to understand audio and video and lighting and a whole bunch of things. For me, when I want to take a break, I decided to sequester still photography. I used to go do a lot of shooting, and my mental difference of place, there's no client, I'm doing it for myself only, I can take chances. Everything that I did there seemed free of the pressures of video. But also what I learned there informed what I did in video. So I found that useful in that way. So I found an adjacent thing that I could consider my hobby that helped me with my actual work. I thought that was really useful. The other thing I found is that traveling, and particularly when I traveled, I used to go to art museums as often as I can because the creativity exhibited in art, particularly, the big museums are excellent and they really do show you some brilliant things. But if you find little art installations, I can't tell you the number of times that I've gone to some little thing because I got a ping about it somewhere on the net and have been inspired by what the people who are struggling to become solid in artistic crafting have shown me, and it's opened up my mind, and I said, I can maybe go a little bit there too. So that's my answer.
Yeah, go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, like Bill says, my work is my play, but the other thing I'm doing that I love, and I started this project about 2 years ago, is I'm curating a music library of music that I played while I was on the radio, and I have all the CDs. I've got them all from many, many years, and it's kind of fun looking for Hello, It's Me, both versions from Todd Rundgren. There's a lot of songs that are sort of esoteric. Crow, Evil Woman. These are things you just don't typically see. So I like digging for them and finding them and making sure I get a top quality version of it. And then when I'm not doing that, I'm playing with my car.
Yeah, I'm on a multi-year campaign to move my entire household to single ingredient cooking. So basically what that means is that you don't buy anything in the store that has more than 2 ingredients in it, more than 1 ingredient. It's literally like just raw components. And that's a bit of a campaign. It's not really a something you do overnight, because you have to figure out how to cook all the things. And so a lot of it is me studying a lot of cookery to do it, and slowly kind of building systems around that process. And, so that's I enjoy it. I have a lot of cookbooks, and I learn how to build different things over time. So anyways, that's probably the number one pastime I have outside of what I do. And this thing called office hours, which is another hobby of mine. Next question.
Next one comes to us from Steve. Guy Cochran in Seattle. What has been the best thing you have seen in after hours?
Go ahead, Tom.
Well, while we have some stunning sunsets here in Arizona, to be able to watch an Australian sunset live has been a very big pleasure.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
That audio engine, that spotting software, I think it was called AD, that was on last week, was the most amazing thing I've ever seen. I was reading that day. I could not speak. My brain was racing so fast
this?
with that.
I think I might have missed it. And this is an after hours?
No. Oh, I'm sorry. It's after.
An after hours.
Never mind.
Yep. Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, I'd have to say it was when the gentleman, I'm not sure if I could say his name, from F1 came in and talked for over an hour about the behind the scenes of how they rig up all the wireless cameras and how they deploy. It was fascinating.
Yeah, go ahead, Bill.
For me, it was the after hours after the show that Andy Carluccio came on and blazed through like 100 questions. It was just such a fun display of competence from somebody who really knew their skills superbly well. I just enjoyed that so much.
Yeah, I think the thing that jumped out at me, I think for me, was there was a morning, I don't know, 5:40 in the morning or something. Like a lot of us start to I try to get there by 5:30. A lot of times I'm late if I'm working on some other stuff. But Todd Reynolds was on, and he said, "What would you like me to play?" And I threw him a curve. I thought a curve. I was like, because my favorite fiddle song is Ashokan Farewell. So I asked him to play it. And he was like, "Oh yeah," he just played it. It was just an amazing rendition of it, and I was like, "I cannot believe that this just happens in after hours." And it was just really, really. I was kind of amazed. So anyway, that was probably the one that just jumped out at me. The next question.
Stephen Bauer in Seattle, Washington says it was mentioned the other day that from the command line, you can reboot your Mac and have it log in on restart by giving it a password on that command line. Does anybody know how?
I actually don't. I mean, I know that you can do it. I have never had to do that. So I think you might have stumped us on this one. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael up next, and he says, how is the content delivered from an NLE to Netflix or another streaming service? I looked at the DaVinci Resolve Deliver page, and they don't have a Deliver to Netflix shortcut, for example.
Go ahead, Bill.
Well, it used to be possible, and I know that in Final Cut, we used to be able to do a password in the actual Final Cut interface, and in the share menu, you could literally automatically upload to some of these services. Most of that has been taken out, and I don't see that functionality anymore. So I'm wondering if there was something abusable or hackable about that created difficulty for people. I know there are some tools that let you automate login services, so I think something is cobbled together, but it's not as easy as it used to be. At least that's my experience.
Yeah, there's the best way to it would take too long to give you all the specifications of delivering to Netflix, but fortunately I don't have to. Netflix has an incredible amount of resources on how to deliver to them, how to shoot. If you look at, I think if you search just for Netflix delivery specifications, you'll see a PDF that you can download that goes into this in intricate detail. The thing about Netflix that is amazing, that their resources on how to deliver, how to shoot, how to manage audio, how to process everything, is all on the web, and it is the cheat sheet. It's like what you should, for any production, you should look at what they're specifying. If you want to do a high-end production, Netflix is an amazing resource. Just do Netflix camera specifications, and you'll see that you'll get to the page. There's like all these different ways that they want you to do things. They're building, thousands of events a year. They need everybody to do it roughly the same way, or the train will come off the tracks. And so they just post it all there, and it's an incredible cheat sheet to work from. So I would highly recommend reading through them, even if you don't do them all. It's good casual reading over lunch. That's what you just kind of go through. Oh, I didn't think about that. Go ahead, Mitchell.
Alex, who do you suppose generates those lists and those specifications?
There's a team at, I don't know if I can mention them, but I don't know if I can name them by name. But there's a team in the post-production team at Netflix. Are guys that many of them are from companies that I used to work at. So, Netflix really got the cream of the crop to come in and kind of think through those things, and they manage them on a daily basis. And the thing is that they're not just, they put out some basic specifications, but these are live documents. So they're looking at all of the events that they're doing and what's catching them and what became a problem in the post-production process. So there's this constant evolution of what they're recommending that is that's constantly moving, and it's some of the smartest people in the industry are working there, figuring this out and thinking through it. And so I don't want to call them out if I don't know if they don't want to be, but they're really, really good people to be listening to. And they're seeing more content go through their pipeline than almost anyone in the world, and so, and they're trying to produce it at a very high quality. And so, it is the best reference. If you want to do a narrative piece or any other piece, and you want, like, you never done this before, it's required reading. Like, you just read through that process, because it'll save you enormous amounts of time. Go ahead, Bill.
And also, I do this a good little bit because I deliver into broadcast locally and sometimes regionally and even nationally. And so if you look at specs that stations or other outlets give you, that is this is what they want. And I agree with Alex 100%. It is incredibly important to read through there and start to understand the shape of the files that they want. But I will say there's been a change, and really over the last couple of years, and it's accelerating now. Just 3 days ago, I delivered a spot set to a small network. And for the first time in my career, not only did I have the specs of the spot in terms of encodings, codecs, wrappers, and all the rest of that, but there was below that an actual list. If you are in this NLE, here are the 3 changes you must make in that NLE. And they had it for Final Cut, Premiere, Avid. And so they're starting to understand that simply giving you what it has to be and not connecting that to what you can do in your software, the common software packages that create this stuff for delivery, is inefficient. So I hope that trend continues. That made delivery to that network a 10-minute process instead of a 2 hours of research process.
Next question.
Next one comes to us from Adrian Albeck in Brisbane, Australia. The producer of Better Call Saul has indicated he does not use de-aging software at all on all of the actors. Just what tools and techniques are used for de-aging a person's face digitally? Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, there's a couple of different levels of it. There's the Hollywood level, and then there's the average guy level. When I'm using software to fix somebody that might have a little facial problem or issue, I usually use Magic Bullet from Red Giant, now Maxon. There's some beauty plugins in Boris, and they basically just smooth out things a little bit on your face, but they don't de-age you, don't make you look 30 years younger. So that's for the deep fake people that have the special software.
Yeah, I think the Boris, didn't they buy? I think they bought up some stuff that's there that basically fills things in a little bit. The one that's used in Hollywood is Lola. I mean, that's the big one, and that has been around quietly for a long time. So getting a Lola pass is sometimes in the riders for the actors. Like, they won't act if they're not going to have, because they see it as part of their brand. If they don't get a Lola pass, now that's broken up a little bit, and there's more people that do it. But the secret, the magic bullet, so to speak, for a long time, and that was a lot of hardware and a lot of software and a lot of, because it's doing more than just kind of smoothing things out. Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, the program that Boris bought was from Imagineering software called Mocha Pro, which allows you to apply things.
Yeah, it allows you to apply it. But I was thinking, I just for some reason I'm not my. There is another one that a friend of mine actually did, and I just can't. I'm just spacing it right now. Anyway, so but Anarchy Software used to have one that was that did that pretty effectively. Anyway, but the big one in Hollywood is Lola that I know of. At least the last time I knew about it, no one talks about it. I think there was a Wired article at some point about it, but no one talks about it because no one wants to admit that they're having beauty passes all the time. The other thing that's happening right now is that a lot of actors are getting scanned. So they're getting these very, very high resolution scans of themselves, either through photogrammetry or through LiDAR. And the main thing is that so they can license their rather than having their estate figured out later or whatever, they can license their likeness at different ages over time. And they know that even the technology isn't quite there to do all of that, but the scanning makes it a lot easier to reproduce it later. So getting that stuff done, and a lot of them are getting it done like once a year, once every 5 years, to make sure that you capture all of that stuff. 'Cause for an actor, it's relatively inexpensive to do that. And it means that if you want to go back to especially like if you want flashbacks, they look in the future of being able to do flashbacks. Now we haven't nailed that. So, with a lot of the stuff, but we're getting close to being able to do that so that you can have a true flashback from an actor back to their younger self. And it actually is a scan of their younger self. Next question.
Next one comes to us from Adrian Albeck again in Brisbane. The makers of Yolo Live have announced a cloud streaming platform called YoloCast. Will this be a serious contender in the already crowded cloud streaming market? And they have a link there.
Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, I think so. Maybe once it's in beta right now. So once it gets some usage and people flesh it out, there's other platforms out there, Restream. And so basically what this is doing is it's allowing you to send up one signal and then push it to other places like YouTube. Facebook's not working right now. I was just looking at the specs, and they need authorization to be able to attach it to Facebook. But we've seen some of these other ones, Boxcast. So what they want to be able to do is embed a player into somebody's website. So it's, for churches and whatnot, they don't want all those ads. So it's just another place. But in the meantime, I would recommend it until it gets fleshed out. Our church used the Yolo Live box for over 50 weekends without a glitch. It worked fine. So I trust the hardware. It's just when there's something new like this that's in beta, it's like flesh it out before you use it on a real show.
Yeah, what I would say is, I guess, that I think this is more of a value add to their current users as opposed to trying to go after the other platforms like Restream and Vimeo and others that do things that are very similar to this. So I think that it makes a lot of sense if you've already got them. It allows you to build a more integrated experience for the user, for the hardware users. So people who are using their box already, having something that's easy to tie in, I think is probably an advantage to, just to provide that as a service and capture more revenue from each user. So I think that those are things that make a lot of sense. I don't think that they're going to go up against a lot of the larger services, but I think that it's a great way to have more control over their pipeline. Next question.
Next question comes from Noah Sargent here on the panel, Fullerton, California. Is there a 10G unmanaged switch you'd recommend? I'm looking for a smaller 5 to 8 port and a larger 24 port rack mount, and he sees the new TP-Link TL-SX105.
Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, I'd want to know why you want to go unmanaged. I would go managed. So the one that I'm looking at getting, in addition to the two that I have regular just switches that are not 10G. They just have the 10G uplink. But George introduced me to the 10G aggregation from Ubiquiti, and that's something I'll put a link in the chat. And they are shipping. They are available. They're SFP modules where you pump them in, but then it's managed, and you can do a lot of things, especially if you have multicast, IGMP snooping, all the Dante stuff. I mean, you got to be careful, and just throwing a dump switch in there can wreak havoc on certain things. So I don't think that I would recommend just a non-managed.
Go ahead, Noah.
Yeah, I think that's where my ignorance is showing a little bit, because I thought you needed one device to manage everything, so everything else should be unmanaged. So, but if it makes sense for, because basically there'll be multiple switches on the network. So again, I'm not as experienced in this, so I'm still learning. So
You just want to know what you're doing once you start putting a lot of managed switches on the network. That's the main thing is that it is more work to do that. Unmanaged switches will let you just throw them on and they tend not to get in the way, but they also don't tend to let you control what you need to control over as you grow. So it just depends on where you're going. As when people get started, I tell them don't just have a router and a bunch of unmanaged switches, but in most of our systems, we're managing everything. Like we want everything to be managed all the way through so that we can control all of the pipelines as they go out. And I think that at a budget, the Ubiquiti lines are probably some of the best, for that. At not a budget, I would recommend Meraki. So the Meraki stuff, in my opinion, it's easier to administer online. Like that's the big thing with Meraki is that it's just I find it to be much easier to administer. I worked with some Ubiquiti stuff, and I think they both do the same thing. In my opinion, there's not many features that stick out that Meraki has, except for the ease of use. To manage a large fleet. Next question.
JHB in New York is up next. Can the Blackmagic Design streaming bridge be connected to a mobile phone? I want to stream church services from inside to overflow outside via an ATEM to another ATEM with a streaming bridge. Thanks.
Good, no.
Yeah, so the streaming bridge can pull down an encode from an ATEM Mini, right? So the ATEM Mini is your send and the bridge is the receive, essentially, over your network. And so to connect a phone, you would actually have to connect it via the ATEM if you want to do it that way. I think what might be a better solution and what my church uses, I put a link in the back end, but it's to a Magewell NDI encoder. And so you could basically encode your output, and over NDI, you can pull that back down. And so that's what we do at my church currently for an overflow room is we use that. But we also use one of the outputs for our switcher. So.
Next question.
Next one comes from us from Christian Ortiz in South Florida. And he says, any recommendations on bone conducting headsets? Looking for something to use in situational awareness environments like when running or cycling.
Go ahead, Tom.
Absolutely. I like the Shocks. There you go. That's what they look like. And use them every single day.
And your ears don't get stuck in your ear. They don't get dirty. They're just sitting there right against your bones there. How clear is it? Do you hear much bass in those?
Yes, they're great.
They're great. Okay. Excellent.
I listen to music. I listen to podcasts, just all sorts of things. And they're great.
That's awesome. Bill?
I do just under an hour of walking every day for health and fitness reasons, and I just use AirPod Pros in transparency mode, and I'm surprised that the transparency mode allows you to keep track of what's coming up behind you and things like that pretty well.
Good, Josh.
Yeah, and the way that I second the AfterShokz headphones, they have really good Bluetooth coverage. Bone conduction is a different animal than your regular, hearing and audibility. What it does is it allows you to have a different way of getting audio in, and it leaves, like I'm wearing in-ears here, so you can have two different, ways of inputting. You don't have to mess with your ears. You can still hear. But it is not high quality. This is not hi-fi. So there's definitely some frequencies that people can massage your head if they speak in. It just kind of vibrates on things. And, that could be a thing in certain frequencies. It doesn't like very much. But I appreciate the bone conduction for the unique things that bone conduction can do that other inputs can't. Not hi-fi, though.
Are you... looking at the AfterShokz, there's a lot of them. Does it make a big difference? What do the more expensive ones do that the less expensive ones don't? Do you know? They range from like $80 to like $180, and so I'm curious what the difference
I actually got these on a really good deal. I got them for like $40. I looked at them again. They're like $60 now.
Right.
But I've compared the audio quality for the mic. Some of them have a boom arm that come down to extend. I've compared these audio quality wise just informally in after hours with some people that have the boom arm. We can't tell the difference with the audio quality. They all pretty much work the same. There are some that you can buy. I know there are some that are cheaper market. They're actually waterproof. So you could wear them, shower with them, swim with them. Some have. That's kind of a nice feature for this form factor.
Go ahead, Tom.
Well, you get your longer battery life. You get your different type of charging connector rather than a mini USB connection. It's a MagSafe type connection that snaps in. They give you 2 charging cables. That's nice. And you got to look at the little nuances there.
And which one do you have? Do you have the more expensive one or the less expensive one?
Well, the ones that I'm wearing now are the ones that actually have the microphone, but I don't use it. And because it's not going to give you a high LPR 40 type of sound.
Yeah.
But I have a variety of them.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. I'm interested in that. I really didn't think about the fact until we were talking about it before the show. I was like, oh, I could put comms on that and then put something else on something else. Like if in a show, I could be actually listening to the show in stereo, in my ears, and then have something else that's passing comms to me, which I find to be very fascinating. Usually I have headphones over top of my in-ears.
Shocks used to make a plug-in rather than Bluetooth version, but they took them off the market for some reason. They're focusing on the athletes. You will not see a single old guy in their website.
Yeah, interesting. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael's up next. He says, after Novation chief designer Chris Huggett died, it took them 2 years to fix bugs in the Peak and Summit synths. With Dave Smith, Sequential's founder, having died, would you be concerned about the long-term support of Sequential's products?
And Sequential is known for making the profit line. I think is probably what they're most known for. It's always a challenge when a founder leaves or passes away, because there's just a certain energy and focus, and a lot of times they had a bigger plan that they were building into that everyone was kind of following. So a lot of it is just managing succession well and making sure that there's enough people around you that can run with it. So I don't know if it's going to be a long-term thing or not, but hopefully they'll be able to muster through it. They've got a lot of products, and a lot of products mean that they generally have a lot of people working on them and thinking about it. So I think they have a good chance. Next question.
Ash Shadev in New York City says, are there any options to use an external subwoofer with a pair of OG HomePods connected to an Apple TV? I missed the low floor shaking rumble from an external sub.
Yeah, go ahead, Bill.
I don't know. I have a pair in stereo of the original HomePods, and I got to tell you, the low end shocks me sometimes. I mean, however they design those things, putting a pair of them in the front of a room has a low floor that I've been surprised with since day one. I sometimes worry about neighbors because of that. But if you want to add a sub, some sort of Bluetooth arrangement would probably be able to do that. I don't know how you'd patch it, maybe through one of the routing tools, but boy, that's a lot of low end and a pair of HomePods.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, I agree. I'm kind of mixed emotions on subwoofers. I live in a condo, and I don't like it when they do it to me, and I certainly don't want to do it to them. It's sort of mutually assured destruction. So sometimes a well-placed pair of speakers can accomplish the same thing. The idea of it just shaking stuff like they did in Sensorround back in the day, I don't like that.
I had to, with mine, when we moved into my house, I had to put a whole bunch of little felt things underneath things that we were putting in there because our subwoofer shook it so hard that I had to figure out how to have it the whole house would rattle every time we watched certain movies. Go ahead, John.
So I used to work in a stereo store. When I got my HomePods, I thought they sounded horrible. And what was really interesting is when they first came out, you could EQ them through Apple, through iTunes. Apple took that out. And so Rogue Amiga makes an app called Airfoil that lets you connect to the HomePod with an EQ, and you can boost up. If you A/B the HomePod versus a good set of JBLs or Gen X or something, a real speaker, you'll see how bad they sound. And using Airfoil, you can EQ them and make them sound 100 times better.
Yeah, the thing that I would probably think of, okay, I was thinking HomePod. Yeah, HomePods are complicated. You probably would have to feed something that would let you separate the LFE channel. So it's not going to be something that you can do. And the problem really is that coming out of the Apple TV, you would need to get it into a. So, what I would look for is there are a handful of AV receivers that have XLR outputs. So they're not speaker amps, they're XLR outputs. And then you get a self-powered JBL or something else, subwoofer. You feed the one output to that. And then what you do is you feed the other ones into something else that's going to be Bluetooth. I mean, literally this would be like an art project. I would pull those out. I'd put them into something that's going to let me digitize the other 5 channels, or if you're doing 5.1, or other, you can get the monolith from, I think, a couple of folks make actually 16 XLR output AVRs. Denon, I think, discontinued theirs, but I think that there's Monoprice actually makes one that's almost impossible to get. And then there's another company called, I think, Evio or Evino that makes one as well. But then you can take those channels discretely out. And the reason I know about it is because if I need to discretely record beds and channels from Atmos, it's a delivery, that's how you get them out. And then you could theoretically route those and then reroute the other parts. But it would be it's an art project just to get a rumble. Next question.
Next one comes from Josh Kaufman in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. With delayed availability of the BirdDog Play 4K NDI to HDMI converter, I had to cancel my order. I found this similarly priced device on a less than reputable dealer. Link is included. Might a new tech license be a hidden cost of using such a device?
I think I don't. Yeah, go ahead, Josh.
Yeah, so I did have an order in for the BirdDog, and they seem to push back the projections to when those are going to arrive. I was looking at this device on AliExpress, and I've noticed that some of the other devices, they come with the hardware, but they don't have a new tech license included with them. So that might be a hidden cost. I have no experience with applying the license or how that works. So interested to know whether that's might be something that's legit, might do the feature. It doesn't offer all the features that the BirdDog offers, or is that likely to work, or will I likely need, it doesn't say anything about the license either. Some devices do say that, you have to apply the license to them.
I have to admit, I've learned not to buy anything that I really need from AliExpress. so I buy things that are fun from there, but the level of workmanship oftentimes on things are hit and miss. So I think that the thing I'd be mostly concerned about is stability and basically buffer overruns, where you would see, basically a lot of the stuff in AliExpress is underpowered. So a lot of the chips, they've cut a bunch of corners on the chips, and they will very quickly start to, and I bought a lot of digitizers from AliExpress. And so that's where we see frame loss is the number one thing that we see with those things. Also, you're going to want to look at, if you actually get it, you're going to want to look at the conversion of NDI to HDMI. It seems like it would be simple, but a lot of times the gamma, black levels, white levels, all those things can be different on the way out than what you expected. It's more of a problem when you go from SDI or HDMI to NDI, or not to NDI, but to any other digitization. But I think that you just want to be careful of those things. Mine hasn't been specifically with NDI, but it has been with other signals coming out and being pumped back to a analog, or not analog, but a traditional line. So I would love for you to buy one and test it. How much is it?
$150, about the same price as the Play.
Yeah, go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, I was trying to stay out of this, but the CEO, when he was on here, he said that they're shipping this month, so June, but I heard that in January as well. So we've been waiting a long time. There's a ton of back orders on these. For now, I've been telling people just to get an Apple TV, buy the Sienna software for $99. So you're in at $149 plus $99, and you can install that on as many devices as you want, and it works. It's solid.
There you go. Next question.
Eduardo Augustine in Panama. What are your thoughts on the new Vocaster podcasting hardware? Has Guy been able to take a look into this new product?
Go ahead, Guy.
This is one that I haven't heard of. This is where I would like to have gone to a NAMM type show to go explore the floor, but it looks like it's a new one from Focusrite. It looks like a small piece of hardware. The thing with these is it's always just how clean are the pre's and what mic or instrument are you attaching to it? And is it going to sound clean without having to do a bunch of work in post? So maybe I'll get one. So I don't know on this one.
It's an interesting setup. So it's XLR input, and then it gives you, I guess it looks like it gives you gain control as well as headphone control. So it looks good. I think, we use a lot of the upper end of Focusrite's line, and it's flawless. We have been their lower end stuff has been inflicted upon us. It's very different circuitry. Like it's the upper end and the lower. It's a kind of a bummer because I feel like you go into a Focusrite solution thinking that it's the same as the stuff that we buy, these Dante and Analog and stuff, and it's not. They've definitely cut it down, and so I have to admit that I won't buy anything from Focusrite that costs less than about $300. Go ahead, John.
Yeah, I looked at this product. It looks like a consumer entry-level product to me. Just like Alex says, they've got the Scarlet line, then they have the Claret line, and then they have Red. And the Red's the top of the line that Alex is talking about. It's great, great stuff. This thing, I would buy something else other than this thing.
Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, it just looks like it's a product designed for the bundle because a lot of people want to get into podcasting. And so their bundles that use this have boom arms and mics and everything else you need. It's kind of a pay once, get everything. And I'm sure somebody who really, doesn't want to invest a ton of money, but wants to try out podcasting because it's such a hot area, it probably works fine because there's nothing particularly difficult about getting a voice out of you into a decent microphone and off onto the web. But I would suspect that, like everybody else is saying, this is not the top end stuff that you would get by bespoke putting together a system.
Yeah, I mean, I think that if I was going to just try to get XLR in, I would probably look at a Shure X2U or the I think that Shure also makes another their MV line, I think, has an MV 88 or 51 or something like that has its own input there. And I'd probably lean more towards those as XLR. They're not going to be, they don't have the big shiny knobs on the front of them, but they're going to do the same thing. Like, and for less money. And I've had very spotty experience. I mean, the number one thing that sucks up our time, the number one thing on a remote guest that we don't send a kit to, the number one thing with over 5,000 preps is a Scarlett. Like, as soon as we know that they have a Scarlett, we just brace for impact. Like, just like it's going to be, and we don't even know if it's going to work during the show. Like, it'll test well, and then it breaks down during the show, before the show. There's nothing that's delayed more of our shows than Scarlett's doing something different when we got to the show. So that is the piece of hardware that we try to avoid at all costs when we and we'll literally, if we find out, we've gotten to the point now where we'll just send people kits. Like, let me send you something like Mix Pre or something like that. I'll send you something before I have to expend labor time on trying to figure out why your Scarlett isn't working, because when it works, it's fine, but it just doesn't work a lot. Next question.
Next one comes to us from Chris Widener in Lafayette, Indiana. Does Shadow PC introducing a premium tier move the bar for using it in production?
Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, I think so. When I ran the Maxon software called Cinebench to benchmark this thing versus some of the computers that I had here locally, it came in last place. So Shadow PC was like super weak, especially compared to AWS and Google Cloud and Azure offerings. So I was unimpressed as far as not just the power, but the fact that you can't go in and open up ports. So in AWS, a key part of what we do is pop open ports, close them, and we can adjust that security at will. So I'm hoping for their premium tier, it's not just aimed at gamers where they don't need some of those security settings, that they actually allow professional users who want to use them for production to pop open ports and do some of the things that we need to do, like NDI bridge and SRT in and out.
Next question.
Next one comes to us from Douglas Carmichael. What 10G managed switches with a command line interface and or a NETCONF API would you recommend that are reasonably priced?
I don't know if all of those requirements fit together. so I think that what the first thing that comes to mind when you're talking about these are Cisco switches. I mean, that are not going to be It depends on what reasonable priced is to you. But I think that low price and lots of control don't always fit together well. So that's all I would say right there, especially 10G. Next question.
Liberty White in Atlanta, Georgia. If your talent has to move around 4 to 6 feet during lecturing, what's a good mobile microphone system to use for a live stream into an ATEM?
Go ahead, Noah.
So I know not all presenters like this, but when I have the option or they're asking me what I prefer, I will give them a handheld, ideally wired, but it just depends on the situation. The SM58 is a good standard for that, and sure has a great lineup a system. So I currently use the BLX system. My church uses the XLD, I believe it's called, but super high quality interface for that. If they don't like a handheld, then you're forced to use either a lav or a headset microphone. If I had an option there, I would give them a high quality headset mic, and then last but not least would be some sort of lapel on their chest. The reason for that is when they move their head or move around or touch their shirt, like that's going to pick up the most. The headset tends to be more consistent, but the handheld, just because of the larger diaphragm, tends to be a more preferred sound for my preference.
Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, this is the zone where body pack transmitters, that's kind of the industry name for them. It's a small transmitter on your belt that works with either a lav or you can plug a headset into it. And that gives you the freedom of mobility, as Josh just kind of indicated. It allows your hands free. And so I've had a lot of professional speakers and amateur speakers who are just people who love to talk with their hands. So the fact that you're giving them a stick mic, even a wireless one, constrains them a little bit. Other people it's fine for. This is something where you configure the system for whatever is going to make it easiest for the talent to do their work, and kind of you keep out of their way.
Good, Guy.
Yeah, this one may be a little premature to show, but I'm testing something kind of interesting just to show you how small this is. This is called the Erica by Convergent Design, for those of you who remember the recorders. This is what it looks like. It's super tiny, and this is a back plate that is magnetic, so that just snapped back on there. USB powers it and charges it, and then this is the receiver, and this is a 2 kit, so this is 2 of them. So one receiver, and it's just USB. So this is the whole thing. Like this can plug into a phone too, since it's just a USB device. But I'm testing it. Sounds okay. People in after hours were saying that's doesn't sound as good as this mic, which is going through $1,000 chain, versus this is like $150. But it's called the Erica by Convergent Design, and they're also making some really cool apps that work directly with Zoom, so that this can tell who the person is, and it'll actually switch Zoom over to that person. So in a conference room type setting, it'll actually, if you have a 4K camera, it can switch from Bob to Sue based on, it knows who's talking with the app. So you could make these like red and green and give them different colors. So you can do 12 with one receiver. Kind of interesting stuff. New tech.
Go ahead, Josh.
I just wanted to ask, Guy, what transmission frequency is it using?
I think it's 2.4 or 1.8. I'm not sure. It'll be on their website. I just got them for beta testing from the company. But yeah, there's the kind of it looks almost like a lighter. That's if you remember the old Zippo lighters, that's kind of the size of this thing that it goes in. So that's the whole kit, the Erica wireless multi-mic.
Yeah, and I think that the in the 2.4 range, I think that the both, I haven't tested the DJIs, but they look really promising. People I've talked to seem to like them, that have been playing with them. Obviously I have a bunch of the Rode Go's, and those have been fairly successful at 4 to 6 feet. If you're putting the receiver right underneath it, or if you're not very far back, those can work pretty well. I wouldn't, it just depends on how high profile your event is, whether you're going to use a 2.4 or 5, or 5G kind of receiver. Once you go above that, you're probably going to be okay with something like a Sennheiser. Just remember that a Sennheiser G4 or G3 or whatever, first thing that you do is change the frequency. Like literally when you open the box, just change the frequency, because it's what nobody else does. And literally people step on each other all the time at these events, and even in you'd be surprised at how many Sennheisers, because it's a very popular wireless mic. And so just change it pretty dramatically, move that frequency around to get away from it. The other thing to think about is whether you need to own it or whether you need to rent it. You can rent a really nice a really nice receiver that is, so like for instance, if you want a pretty good electrosonic, setup, with a wireless transmitter and a wireless receiver, you're talking about $150, $200 a day, and on a 3-day week. So is that something that you can put into your budget? If you can, then it just works. like this is what this thing does, and it's a really high quality system. You could rent also, you could look at audio limited and all of those things if you're not trying to buy it. So I think that's the other thing to think about from a cost perspective. Generally with speakers, whether I go with lav or headset has to do with whether it depends on the room. So if the room is a what we call live, it's very echoey, then I'm going to want to put them on a headset. If it's a soft room, then I think more about soft. Then I think that maybe they can have a lav. I hate the way lavs sound. Like they're just grating for me, And so I just think that you hear the whole room, you hear all kinds of other stuff going on. I find them to be, atrocious, but I will do them if I feel like, but some people like them. They don't like the headset. So from a sound perspective, from a look perspective, they may want the lav. And in that case, something like a DPA or a Countryman, small profile, going into I also don't use Sanken lavs, not because they're not good, because they're too good. They pick up everything. So the Sanken lavs I find are so sensitive that we have to quiet the whole room. Like they're great if you're doing interviews, but if you're doing interviews in a controlled environment, they're amazing. If you do it in anything that is remarkable, if someone's teaching in front of people or there's anything going else in the room, Sanken will pick up so much stuff that we can't. It's really hard to manage. So anyway, next question.
Next one comes from Douglas Carmichael. The Yamaha MODX synthesizers have a keybed with keys in groups. And he has a link there. Instead of individual keys like other keyboards, could this be done for cost reduction, weight reduction, or both?
I think that we're starting into a pattern, and I have to admit that Carl is really our big synthesizer person, and he's here on Tuesdays. Like I don't know about every Tuesday, but I think the synthesizer questions are best kept for Tuesdays because he'll be able to answer those in better detail than we will. Next question.
Next one comes to us from Robin Cutshon, Atlanta, Georgia. Anyone using a 5.1 or 7.1 speaker config at their desk, and if so, is it a good one?
Go ahead, Mitchell.
I don't know if I'm answering his question fairly, but I don't, because I've got Genelec speakers and I just don't have deep enough pockets to put 5 or 6 Genelecs up on the wall.
Yeah, the ones that we have at the office that we just have that are for kind of basic near field, we're not trying to do production with them. So it's just like, can I hear from the speaker kind of thing? Are the JBL, I think they're the 306s or 305s, that I think 305s. And they're not incredibly expensive speakers, but they sound pretty good. And it gives us, I think right now we're set up for a 5.1. And so that's, and they're about $150 a piece. So they're not a huge expense, especially when you have as many as we do. I have enough of them to build a 714. So I was conscious of the cost of each speaker because of that. And so anyway, so that's what we have sitting in the office. Go ahead, Bill.
Well, I was just going to note that depending on what kind of work you're doing, mostly I do work for broadcast and or occasionally, often the web, sometimes for PA applications. And in almost all those cases, particularly the PA stuff that's going out to a crowd, I'm mixing down to mono. So all the extra imaging stuff that you get, a certain amount of imaging from stereo, it can kind of give you the feeling that instruments are placed in space. Obviously, that really increases if you're moving to 5.1 and 7.1, but almost none of the people who are listening to my work, I can be assured of, will have those. If I was working in theaters and the theaters had Dolby systems, absolutely, I would find 5.1 or 7.1 mission critical, and I would always want to have it if I was producing for that, but most of my work isn't. So that collapse to mono stage is critical for me because it's quite normal for me to be in a circumstance where all the even big area speakers are outputting in mono, because a lot of sound reinforcement systems do that. They don't run in stereo, they run in mono.
Go ahead, Noah.
Alex, I was curious to know, did you end up building the desk with wheels and multiple speakers?
Not yet. Okay. My day job has gotten, again, busy as always. And so the mixture of office hours and my day job has saturated my my work week. So I haven't built it out. We have this idea. I have this sketch for one that is sitting there waiting to be worked on. When I, take about every 3 months, I go, I'm going to take a month off and just get a whole bunch of things done. There's a whole bunch of things that need to be done. I just need to take a month off, and I have the vacation time to do it. I just have too many to dos. Like too many things will fall apart if I leave for even a couple days. It feels like. So I have not not done that. So but I will say that I would pay a lot of attention to surround. It is worth thinking about at least putting up a couple speakers, thinking through that process. Apple spending an enormous amount of energy building up tools for that. We should not miss that Apple is very committed to surround. And so that usually means that there's a market opportunity coming, that may not be here yet, especially when you look at AR and VR tools. When we start talking about VR and AR, all of us start talking about surround sound. It really adds a lot to what's going on, whether it's ambisonic or binaural or a typical 5.1 or 7.1 or Atmos. The hard part with any of these things is the people that benefit when something happens are people who have been playing with it for years, not the people when the market opens up. It's not the people who just jump in and go, okay, now I got to figure out how to do surround. It's people who've been fiddling with it for a long time and figuring out how it works and figuring out what those are. They're in the right place. Opportunity is when preparation meets, or luck is when preparation meets opportunity. And so when you're prepping for it. So I would highly recommend paying a lot of attention to the surround opportunities, and even if you don't use it every day, trying to mix stuff into these spaces is going to be more and more important as we move forward. Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, I kind of agree with what, by the way, good point. I agree with what Bill was saying about mixing things down and don't overthink it in terms of channels, because I do a lot of broadcast work, and I hear a lot of bad examples of somebody trying to do surround mixes on a broadcast commercial or a spot. They've got the center channel voice down way too low or too high, and it's sometimes just easier to send a stereo mix out with your TV commercial.
Yeah, the only thing I'll say is that producing for lowest common denominator work commoditizes your output. So you're now competing with a lot of people. Like when you get into understanding a specialized output, you can charge a lot more because you're the only ones that know how to do it. So that's been my life for the last 10 years is that, like I'm usually the only one or one of a very small number of people that can charge for something, that can do something. And that definitely means that we can create products that are, there's not a lot of competition. I'm definitely very much of a greenfield kind of person. If I see more than about 10 people in a field, I'm like, I don't think this is the place for me. I'm going to go to something that's more open. So it's not that you might have to output that, but I am constantly trying to figure out what the next thing is and learn what that next thing is so that I can get into that front edge of the market where you get paid to learn. Like that's the big thing is when you're building lowest common denominator, you're in the grind. Like from a production perspective, you don't have a lot of control over price. You don't have a lot of control over the components. You're basically being driven by the market as opposed to you driving the market. And so it's a very valid way to go. It's just, to me, that's a very unenjoyable place to be because it's just, you're just kind of grinding stuff out. And so anyway, so that's all. So I would highly recommend people listening is that always think about how to get yourself into a place that you're special. All right, next question.
Chris Widener, Lafayette, Indiana, says, as more reviews come out about the Rode RODECaster Pro II, I keep seeing features that make me consider it. What's the panel's opinion about it?
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, this device might just win the most hyped device coming out of anything out there because there's a huge amount of hype, and I guess some people have been able to get beta versions. But based on the original, the Mark I version of it, that was a nice product, and it was sort of a game changer for a lot of podcasting. They've made some improvements on it, particularly in the mic pre's and in the processing power in the units. I guess there can be more Aphex goodness inside of it, along with other things that make it even better. So my opinion is the hype looks really interesting, but until I've got it in my hands, I can't give you an honest answer.
Yeah, go ahead, Bill.
I'm sure the tool is just fine. To me, it reminds me of voiceover. It's not having the equipment to do it. It's having the skill to do it that really is the most important thing. You can send 1 million of these out, and you're still going to have 10 people that people want to listen to because they've got the content part. If you think this is in your future and you want to play in the podcast game, this would be, I'm sure, an absolutely fine product to get a start with. But it's paying attention to your performance over the equipment. The equipment's not going to be the limiter, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think the big thing is it's usually something that's all in one is a great way to get started, and then you'll immediately hit a ceiling somewhere, in that process. One of the things that I would say that I still haven't seen anybody really solve is figuring out how to build remote podcasts. Like I'm working on a podcast right now, and all the stuff with MacBreak and everything else. What we need is a system that ties together so that I have a centralized mixer. I'm recording on the end, so I'm doing a double-ended record, but I'm able to have a conversation and all of that being tied together. The first company that does that is going to make millions, tens of millions of dollars, because the getting everyone in one place to do a podcast is really painful. And so, and I've never actually done that. I mean, almost every podcast that I've done, I've done a handful of them at times, but almost all the podcasts that we do are remote. And that has been the case for 15 years, and we double-ended them on Skype and we did a bunch of other things, but we very rarely have people all in one place. And I feel like the market is not paying attention to that need. Next question.
Rod McNulty in Vancouver, Canada. Import videos from friends for iPhone. He has shot movies on his iPhone and wants them in one movie. He won't use iCloud. He won't use Cloud or Google. It doesn't say iCloud, it says Cloud. We know he should. He won't. Can I import the footage to my PC or Mac from his phone, and will it work like file import?
Go ahead, Noah.
So I would use AirDrop, and basically you can AirDrop the file or transfer the file to a Mac specifically, and so you can gather all the footage there and then take it into your NLE or editor, and then compile those into a single video.
Yeah, go ahead, Tom, real quick.
That's it, AirDrop.
Bill?
Even faster, just hook up a cable, just a regular Lightning to USB cable, and it'll suck it right into your computer right off the phone.
It'll just ask you if you want to if you want to trust this device, and then after that you can start pulling stuff in. Next question.
Next question comes to us from Eduardo Augustine, Panama. I've been struggling on deciding to send audio directly to the encoder, OBS and Vmix, instead of directly to the ATEM Mini. I've been experiencing delay and audio problems since I learned this week that the ATEM Mini requires unbalanced audio to the mic input. Thoughts?
Yeah, go ahead, Noah.
Yeah, you got to find the sweet spot there when you have a dual system going into your computer, and so you'll just have to test that and figure out what that latency is, and then make it a repeatable system.
Yep, absolutely. And the easiest way to do that is to do, if you really just want to set it up, you don't have to do it in real time. You don't have a lot of time. You want to just absolutely figure it out. Hit record or stream out to something. Take something, you can take a clacker, or you can, clap, or you can say something that has a large impulse, just something that makes a large impulse. Do that right next to a microphone, and then just open up the file in your NLE and look at how far off it is. You're going to see the impulse. You're going to see where you go to the frame that it actually closed, and you move the impulse and you measure that number, and then you put that number into the delay, and then you're done. And it should, from then on, it should be right on. Next question.
Tom Ferguson here on the panel from Phoenix. You've mentioned headset mics as a preferred source for moving talent. Which ones do you prefer?
Go ahead, Noah.
So Countryman tends to be the top of the line stuff that I buy. I'm sure there's even better stuff than that, but specifically for my church, I think we have the H6 from Countryman, which is really highly recommended. If you need a more affordable option, there's the Galaxy Audio HSM 8. It's pretty good. I use it for a lot of stuff. There's also an HSM 3, which is about half of that price, but I would only use that one for spoken word if you do any sort of performance or louder environment type stuff that may not be the mic for you.
Go ahead, Bill.
There's a whole bunch of them out there. So you mentioned Countryman, DPA kind of on top of that. Then most of the companies, Audio-Technica, Shure, all make head-worn microphones. Famously, Garth Brooks used to use a crown and sang into that, so that's obviously pretty full range. And then there's a ton of stuff on the low end that you can get down that does a decent job. We used to talk about some of them here on the show in the early days, if it's just for voice.
Yeah, the two that we use the most are the DPA 4066s and the Countryman H6s. The H6s are a little bit more present and a little lower profile than the DPAs. The DPAs have better bass response, in my opinion. It feels more full-bodied, but they're also almost twice as expensive as the Countryman. But those are the two. We always get omnis. We never get directionals. Directionals are much more susceptible to plosives and all kinds of other scratching and other sounds. And so the omnis will sound more full and will have less of the air issues that the directional headsets have. So those are, but pretty much 99% of everything that we've gotten above $100. Like we buy lots of cheap ones for folks, but the Polsons and the stuff. But once we go over $100, we have a Countryman H6 and then the other thing to look at is DPA makes ones with headsets built in. So they actually have earpieces that you can put in either one ear or both ears with the DPA, which I haven't bought, but I keep on looking at going, oh, I need one of those. Anyway, now we're going to go ahead and jump into the second hour and talk to NAMM and Cine. Our team is slowly putting all of the pieces together. It's been an incredible amount of work getting prepped for this and lots of changes and trying to figure all of those out. And so we're going to give you an update and answer your questions. So if you have questions about how we're covering these and what goes into this, go ahead and throw the questions into Mokana. Go ahead, Noah.
Yeah, lots of moving parts for sure. Lots of last minute changes, which is what we expect with these kind of shows. I do want to say for any of the panelists, feel free to raise your hand if you have any specific updates, because we are a little low on questions. And for our producers, feel free to throw in some questions. I just have a few things to update the team on. So we were originally planning on having 2 sets of teams for the boots on the ground, right? Jeffrey Whittam is still participating in our primary group. Jeffrey Powers did catch COVID, and so he's no longer going to be participating with us because of that.
And he is doing better. I just checked in with him over things, so he's getting better. He's fine. I mean, he's okay. He's getting better. It's not. There's nothing. We don't need to worry. He hopes to be back next week into office hours. But anyone who might be worrying about him, he's doing better.
Get well fast, Jeffrey.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. And hopefully he'll be joining us on the panel. It'll completely be up to him and how he's feeling, obviously. So we're going to go down to 1 team for now. And that's always been kind of our caveat is the boots on the ground teams, I guess you can say. That's always the hardest thing to staff, right, to get people there because there's travel and hotels and costs and whatnot. So we're going to go with a single team for now. And yeah, so that will be the major shift there. Another thing, we're going to try Stream Voodoo. I'm talking to the team, Marcelo, on the back end, and just trying to figure out specifically around cloud recording. And the thought there is our stream out to the cloud. If we record it there, we can have editors essentially pull that down right away, and then basically make a recap or a highlight. So we might experiment with that as well. And then another thing, and I'll put this in as a question so we can come back to this, but I'm just kind of curious because I know a few people have pinged me about specific events that they want to possibly cover in the future. So maybe we could talk about a workflow for that later on in the show.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that the big thing is finding enough people that are ready to cover something. So, and the thing that I would look at if you're looking at some of these teams, this is an incredible opportunity to get a chance to work with other people. Even if it was about something you may not be that as interested in, covering these events is a great way for us to practice. It's a great way for us to figure out the techniques that we want to use. I think that if you have the time to get involved with these programs, it's a great way to network with other people, get to know them, show what you can do, show how you fit into a team or not, hopefully how you fit into a team, and really learn a lot. And all of us, it's not that you're learning from anyone, it's peer-to-peer learning. We're all learning from each other and we're all figuring this out together. And I think that those skills can be applied to a lot of different things. And so it's a really great opportunity. I mean, this is actually the most core, covering events is the most core thing to what we do, because the very first Pixel Core project back in, would have been 2000, was the very first thing that we did there, it might have been 2001, was covering BattleBots. We literally sent a team of 20 people to BattleBots and we followed people along. So basically we talked a little bit. We had the ones that we think that might actually work, and we just followed them along on their whole prep experience and everything else. There's like 2 people for each of these, and got to see them go all the way into the competition and then gave them a bunch of videos they could post on their. I mean, BattleBots gave us access, and we just gave them back a bunch of videos. But we had a whole bunch of people learn how to shoot video and learn that they could do it. And these are folks that were, admins in databases, and they were, teaching in local schools, and it was not a lot of professionals doing it. And I think that's the thing, is that there's a real opportunity, and it was a real bonding experience. And so it is literally the most core thing that we can do. And it's just great to go out there and shoot something. And what's great about covering events is you don't have to think too hard about it, in the sense that it's an experience. And when we're done with it, the chances of us thinking about it again are very low, as far as like whatever the content was. And that gives you freedom to just go do stuff, like just go cover things, throw things up against the wall, and not worry about it too much. That kind of content is really valuable, because you learn more faster. When you're not trying to build the ultimate thing that's going to be on, that we're hoping is going to have long legs into the next, year or two or whatever. We're just putting something up that's interesting and it's covering this moment and experiencing it. And so I would highly recommend jumping into these events. And I also just want to acknowledge the team that's putting these together. It's just, I watch the meetings go by. I don't get to go to very many of them. They're during my work day, but it's an incredible amount of work that's being done by the team to get ready for this. And again, I would highly recommend getting involved. All right, let's go to the next question.
It comes to us from Laura Thompson, who's on the team in Texas. And she says, Noah and Josh, what are you most excited for this project, and what are you most worried about?
Go ahead, Noah.
I'm excited for a lot of things. I think it's just fun to see our skill set amplify, and just to see how, adding one person here or one person there just completely opens up the project for new things and exciting things. The thing I'm most worried about is already kind of affected me a little bit, is the time commitment. And I kind of knew that going in. So there's been some times where I've been, dark catching up with clients and, paid work. And I think that's going to be kind of a similar theme with a lot of us, because, it's when we're getting something started, Sky says this really well, is basically we're kind of like a startup, right? And we're all just trying to get in and make it happen. But I think it's been magical. It's been a lot of fun just growing with people and getting to know people better, and experiencing people and how they work. But to Alex's point, to Chris Fenwick's point, like when he said this a few weeks ago, but when you're in the trenches with people, you get a new experience with that person, and you get to grow with them and see what they're really like.
Go ahead, Josh.
Yeah, I would say excited and worried is actually the same thing for me. It's the unknown. So it's nice that we're able to do these things that we're getting to the second time around. So the unknowns are becoming less, but there's always, there's contingencies that we have, things that we have to pivot on, hopefully cover that. But just the unknown is a thing that can be concerning. But the unknown is also an opportunity. Lots of times when we approach the show date, a lot of us are on the planning end. We really have our heads down, and we're really thinking about logistics and planning. And when the show date comes, what you kind of forget about is the content and the reaction to it and the panelist interaction. I am looking forward to people that are, really big music enthusiasts, kids in their own playground, and sort of the serendipity that happens out of that we don't know, the unknown things that happen. So hopefully, if we've prepared things enough and lined things up, I think Alex quoted this earlier, that luck is what happens when preparation meets opportunity. So hopefully there will be some opportunity for some really neat moments for people that are really good at music and really enjoy it, and find their groove on it.
Go ahead, Noah.
What's also interesting for me, I haven't prepped a full project like this to hand it off to somebody else. And that's kind of what I'm going to have to do because I'm local to Anaheim, right? I'm like 10 minutes from here. So I'm going to be a part of the Boots on the Ground team. And I'm handing the torch to Richard Lavery and Brian Shand to help kind of run the show. So the prep work that we're doing, the run of show, all that, we're building ahead of time, but then I'm stepping away so that I can focus on a specific role. In the prep, I was hoping to essentially do the opposite, where I had somebody else on the ground, but like I mentioned with, Jeffrey Powers, there's only a limited number of people that can go in person. I happen to be one of them. So that's the role I'm going to fill. And I'm totally happy to do that, where, I just fill in as needed. And so that that was the need. But the nice thing is there are excellent people that can step in and be a showrunner or be a show caller, and that's what we're going to do.
Next question.
Next one comes from Noah Sargent in Fullerton. Dennis, how the graphics coming along for NAMM?
Go ahead, Dennis.
Thanks. And by the way, happy 800th show. There are essentially 3 parts to the graphics. There's the graphics as we do them on office hours normally, showing products and so forth. Then there will be any overlays, so lower thirds like we did for NAB. And then the third part will be play out of videos. We were hoping to have a system to play the videos directly into the system, but unfortunately that's not ready yet. So it looks like I'll be doing that again this time. But I do have assistants. Mitch Hill and Gary Lund will be on the team this time. So we'll be using LucidLink to share files back and forth quickly. And hopefully that will allow us to do new and exciting things.
And next question.
Next one comes from Tom Ferguson in Phoenix, Arizona. BOG guys work hard, boots on the ground, and need snacks to keep their energy up. What would your favorite NAMM noms be? I want to say NAMM noms 6 times fast.
Go ahead, Tom.
Well, I like the Costco trail mix, but I have to make sure I don't buy the 4-pound feed bag size.
Go ahead, Noah.
Oh my gosh. I'm actually a full meals kind of guy, so I'll do breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and I try not to snack in between myself. Water's going to be crucial for the show floor for sure, but if we need some sort of craft service, I'm more than happy to provide that and figure that out.
It'd be really funny if we had a little table that was on wheels that was just craft services that just followed our team around. And they're like, "What is that going?" Oh, that's craft services. You know, there's a little coffee maker, a little tea, and some little cookies and stuff like that. And they're like, "Oh no, you're not on the crew." Like people would wander by thinking it was for them, and it was just like this little table that just follows the team around with craft services. Go ahead, Bill.
Well, I actually have a little table and an arm that could go on my tripod, put the tripod on wheels, and you could actually do that. I hadn't thought about that. I used to be a Cliff Bars guy when they were first coming out. I know they've been bought by some huge conglomerate now, and they're all the grocery stores. But the thing I like about them is that they're clean to eat, they're satisfying and pretty big. So that would be my go-to backpack. If I had one thing, it'd be probably a blueberry Cliff Bar.
Go ahead, Chris.
When you said table, it made me think of, this is just kind of like general gear thing. Recently I saw a backpack. This has nothing to do with food. I saw a backpack that has a section that's the lower like third of it, like at the small of your back. And this thing, you reach out, you reach behind you. There's a thing like a
side entry.
No, better. Parachute. So like you're pulling the ripcord, you pull this handle, and this thing has this articulated arm that swings all the way around. And now you have a pouch in front of you, almost like it was a fanny pack. And you can like change your batteries. You can get your food. It's like a little section that it swings all the way around to the, now, granted that it may not work on some people, but I'm not going to go there, but it's this neat little, and then you swing it back and it goes click and it clicks in. So people, and it has a zippered top. Really cool for production work.
Yeah. I'm a big fan of, when I am on site, biltong and nuts. That's, almonds is usually my thing. Almonds and biltong are the two things. I don't like to eat anything with carbohydrates or sugar, because they throw off it makes me edgy during production. So I'm almost all, protein and complex stuff, So anyway, those are the two that you'll see me with a little bag of almonds and biltong that I'm working my way through during the day if I'm hungry. But I also try to do as best I can not to do too much in between, other than, because the problem is if you eat too much, it reduces the effectiveness of the coffee. So anyway, go ahead, Tom.
No, I just wanted to hear Bill say nam noms.
Yeah, there we go.
Nam nom, nam nom, nam nom.
All right, next question.
Next one comes to us from Laura Thompson in Texas. Dennis, can you give us an overview of the work you and the team have done with graphics and playout to support the show?
Go ahead, Dennis.
Oops, you're
can't hear
muted.
you, Dennis. There you go.
There we are. Yeah, one of the things I'm trying to do for this is stay within the office hours graphics language, but look slightly different. So the shows have their own language. And to that end, Mitch is currently working on a super source background specifically for NAMM. So I'm looking forward to seeing that.
That's great. Next question.
Michael Vospin in Woodstock, Georgia. What is the goal of covering NAMM? There are hundreds of companies from all over the world.
Go ahead, Noah.
Yeah, it's interesting because I feel like we get this question a lot of like, what is our unique selling proposition, if you want to call it that, right? Like, what is our angle? I think the main thing is we're connecting highly anticipated questions to experts, right? So within Mukana, we can vote up questions. We can see which one is the most anticipated, right? The most popular question, and we can ask those in real time to the experts on the show floor. It's also to expand those conventions to a worldwide audience in real time, right? So we're blowing up the scene and making it a global interaction and not just something specific to who can make it in person. And then it's also to give our OH community a chance to thrive, right? So we're all meeting these challenging problems with our solutions, and we're figuring out things through graphics or through editing or through, creating the show. And I do want to highlight one person, Laura Thompson, who has really just been opening up, and you can see her just kind of running with it. And I know she's a little nervous sometimes about how it's all going to come together, but I can see her dedication and work just really as somebody who's been like standing out and just making things happen, which is awesome.
Yeah, in the early days, one of the big things with all of these things is that anybody can play. Like we've really built something that, most of the time when you're working on a coverage crew, these are crews that have already done this a bunch of times, or this is something that you knew somebody who's asked, or you're in the business. We're making it available to folks that, to work on this that wouldn't normally have access to that. I think it's also a really good service just to our membership alone is to be able to virtually attend these events. The events, by their nature tend to exclude the world, from what's going on, and we're bringing the world back, to these events, because, especially in the current environment, when you build an event like this, you're excluding 99.99999% of the world, and what we want to do is make that more accessible to the rest of the world, to be part of that, to learn from those, to see the new things, to have that excitement that's there. I also think that, from a pure positioning perspective for office hours, I think that if we keep on working at this, it'll take time, but if we keep on working on this, we'll have the best coverage of these events in the world. Like if, we will have, I think that eventually a large panel that understands what they're looking at, talking about something that aren't on site with a camera and a crew that is on site is very unique and unlike anything anybody else is doing. And when we do the best coverage, it really improves our stature as a group in the industry. That opens up all kinds of opportunities. And that's how we have better people on second hours. That's how we have, all kinds of other things that happen because we're doing those things. And so from everything from personal development and skill development to, to being able to open doors for the organization and thus for the members, all of those things. And it's just fun to do. It's fun to get coverage. A lot of us aren't going to be able to make it to NAMM or to Cinegear. I miss Cinegear almost. I've only been to Cinegear 2 or 3 times. I covered it each time, and I loved it. But my work schedule has precluded me from going most of the time, and so I think that it's a real opportunity to have somebody on the ground kind of doing that coverage for us. Next question.
Next one comes to us from Noah Sargent in Fullerton. How can we standardize our process for what events we cover?
Go ahead, Chris.
I think the thing that came up yesterday we got into a big discussion about file naming. I was kind of offline. It was Sky and I and a few other people were there. And it's really important that making things go smoothly means you're going to work really hard in the beginning. You front load your labor with like this kind of labor, right? And when you do, things end up. I literally just got a call from one of the people I work with just this morning, and he's like, I did one of those. This is somebody that doesn't normally edit. I did one of those edits for client XYZ, and I opened up our template stuff, and I threw the stuff in and I did the thing and he was like, I really cranked through that thing. I was like, yeah, that's because we spent months building the process, months and almost years building the process. So the important thing to do is to plan, execute, and refine. Plan, execute, and refine.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Noah?
Yeah, I completely agree with that. So everybody's building and working on their process. Another thing is the scalability of that process, right? So as technicians, we tend to find a short-term solution or like what we can do in front of us, right? Like the solution that I know I can solve right away and make it work. And so when you're short on time or out of time, that's totally an acceptable solution. But long term, we have to think about how can this be repeated if I'm not involved, or if we don't have these 6 people involved. Like, what does that look like at scale with lots of events and lots of people, or lots of events and a few people? So we just need to think through those variables as well. But for me, I guess this question ultimately comes down to like how do we decide as a collective, or Alex or the leadership within OH? How do we decide what makes it onto a calendar, like for us, and what we're going to cover in the future? So generally, I would think there are a few minimums that we need to hit. So like the interest of the community, we need to probably have some sort of voting system of like a minimum of 20 or 30 or whatever votes, right? And then secondly would be the boots on the ground team. Like I'm sure there's going to be a minimum number of people that will need to support that event, right? So maybe it's 6 people or 8 people who are committed to go in person. And then finally would be some sort of leadership or crew commitment, right? Of like how many folks can volunteer and participate in that event.
And I won't say for anything, but my interest in covering these events is mostly driven from a team that's big enough and committed enough to do it, within reason. So if it's remotely connected to education, to media, to, those kinds of things, I'm, and potentially just geekiness. Like I would let you cover a farmer's market if we had enough people that were interested in it. So I think that there is a certain level of let's experiment with lots of different things. The main thing is having enough people on the ground. I would say 2 or 3 people on the ground would be enough for a smaller event. I mean, we're doing this, but I think if you had 2 to 3 people that are willing to be on the ground for something, and I would say probably 6 to 8 people that are willing to work on it remotely. It's more work if you have that few, or we just make it simpler. But the idea is that we don't want to make it so that, oh my gosh, we need 30 people to do something or 50 people to do something. We just need, and again, whether we put it into a second hour is the real question. But for a lot of other things, I put these into like into after hours or third hours or whatever. And if people don't want to watch it, they don't have to watch it. But I think that us figuring it out is the more we can iterate. You just want to make lots of mistakes as fast as you can. I know that I've said this before, but Malcolm Gladwell says that you need 10,000 hours. He stole that. He stole that from Zen Buddhism. Zen Buddhism is much better than Malcolm Gladwell's stupid idea of this thing. It's not hours, it's mistakes. So in Zen Buddhism, it is 10,000 mistakes that you have to do, which is so much more powerful than 10,000 hours. So so what we want to do is make those mistakes often, and then learn from them. So the faster we can get through 10,000 mistakes, the faster we have something that really is something else. And we're making lots of them right now. Go ahead,
Farmers
Josh.
market, really?
Oh yeah, I love farmers markets.
All right, there's farmers market right by my house. We're doing it this weekend. Who's in?
Love farmers markets. Like you're gonna get it's like I go to a farmers market almost every weekend to buy stuff, and so I love farmers markets. I would absolutely cover them. That and antique stores. Have you ever been to like a lot of antiques, like really like in the kind of the emporium type system? I am just fascinated by it. Like I'm fascinated by the history. Anyway, that's a whole.
There's a place in San Francisco. It's a clock shop. Clock shops are amazing.
I just want to point out, we would cover these if we had people that volunteered to do it. Like we would literally do a live stream from a clock shop. Like I'm not kidding. Go ahead, Josh.
So good, interesting points. Just bringing us back. We've been to Zen Buddhism, 10,000 mistakes, clock shops, and farmers markets.
You never saw that coming, did you? This is what happens when you don't ask enough questions as the producers. If we don't feel like we're in a rush, we're just going to go wander around in the outside. Yeah. Anyway,
Happy 800. Yeah, Happy 800th show, everyone. So the original question is how do we standardize this process for events that we cover? And I think the points made are valid with Alex and Noah. Making mistakes and understanding them is helpful, but we don't have to make the same mistakes over again. So with people, we can have familiar roles. So people that have done the roles before and know the strengths of doing things a particular way. That's fantastic for having a system that we can repeat. What's nice is when you get new volunteers, they give you fresh ideas, different ideas of things we may not have thought of. So as people think, oh, that's neat, I'd like to be a part of that, they bring fresh ideas with them and different ideas. We're doing, as we do these things our second and our third time, we can do more iteration as opposed to creation. We can recycle some of the same forms and sheets, take what we've learned and try to make them better. And we've got things that we can see and look back on. Being able to look back on processes is something that we didn't have when we were doing one-off events. And of course, the equipment. Our system is constantly evolving. And as we think about our events, as that's something that we tend to cover more, we'll think about that as to putting features in the back end for making graphics, making scenes that we want to put in. We've gotten help with Mukana. I'll give an update in just a bit, but that helps us for our lifeblood to be able to get questions out to people in the field and be able to take them in.
Go ahead, Noah.
Yeah, I think the biggest point of contention completely relates to what Josh is saying. And I think that's when all of our wonderful team has their own personal preference and experience that they're bringing to the table. So, we'll have 6 different people want to name files 6 different ways, like Chris Fenwick and Sky Gleason have been dealing with and figuring out. So everybody brings that baggage, so to speak. But everybody has a system that works for them. And then it's now, all right, how do we take those data points and then collectively decide what will work best for our community, right? From a higher scale or global scale or what have you. And those decision-making process sometimes is like walking through sand, right? It's a slow, arduous process. And there are people who are like, no, it needs to be this way. And then someone else is like, no, it needs to be this way, So like I said, it's like taking all those data points and then trying to strategically determine what's best. But not only that is to also like pencil in every suggestion, idea, what have you, and not say this is the only way to do it, because just because we do it this way for this show doesn't mean for the next show it might not be different, right? So we need to have that flexibility in the sense of like that iterative process, right? But we need to have a baseline to iterate off of. And so that's, I think, the hardest part of what we're doing is we're creating that baseline so then we can iterate and make it better. And we have to have the attitude that every step of the way, there's something that could be changed or iterated on to make better.
And one thing that I would recommend for the panelists, for the folks that are working on the ground, for the people who are working in the back end, for the people who are watching on Saturday, is build in what we call an RFI. So you can build it. You can build it in notes. You can build it in a document. Whatever is easily available to you. An RFI is room for improvement, and so build an RFI. I recommend everybody do this. And I have an RFI for most events that I work on. And basically, what you'll see me look down and type something in my phone. I am not trying to find the solution. I am just noting something that I noticed was missing. We didn't have this. We didn't figure this out. The food was too cold. There's not enough coffee. There's not enough it's that fast. It's just enough pegs for me to remember. You will forget 90% of it by the end of the day and 95% of it within another 24 to 48 hours. It's just the adrenaline is in the middle of it all. It all wipes clean. It's a defense mechanism within your mind to just, get rid of things that, and just dump them all out. So capture them while they're moving, and just put them on a little piece of paper. Don't take time to try to figure out, you don't want to go, the audio was too loud and we should have used a limiter and this is how we should have done it. And we should have used this mixer. Like that's too much to write down. It's just audio is too loud. And then we can all, but that will help our it transforms your postmortem. And to put it in perspective, when I have a team that's all doing that, a good event will have 75 things or more that people complained about. Like you just said, this isn't working. And that is an event that the client will consider seamless. Is 75 or more. One that doesn't work, hundreds hundreds of things that didn't work, and then it takes hours to dig through what happened. But those are the things and then you try to figure out what the common threads are. And there's usually 3 or 4 common threads, and most of them have to do with lack of preparation. Go ahead, Chris.
2 quick things. One, I would argue that by the time you fade to black, you'll forget most of it.
Yeah.
Literally. Again, the adrenaline thing. And then also in terms of like setting up that process that I was talking about, Eric on the phone calls yesterday said, when we were talking about the file thing, he goes, we got to think about having, like 20 of these. I said, 20? I'm thinking about like 2,000. I mean, imagine a news agency that does nothing but create packages for the evening news. You're going to do thousands of these. And that's where the baseline, Noah, the baseline and the iterations want to narrow. I'm more interested in just having that baseline be the line. So like a quick example would be, here I am, I'm talking about a thing. Well, maybe we'll put a graphic right here. Yeah, build that. Maybe we'll put a little spinny thing over here. Yeah, build that. Maybe we'll do it. No, here's what we do. We build a template for a lower third, and when information comes in, you put it in the template. Now, you might have a template for a thing here, box over the shoulder, and so when that type of information comes in, you put it in that. But you don't want to like reinvent, as you know, you don't want to reinvent the wheel all the time.
Well, and I think that one of the things that I think is great is you have the bigger shows that we might have 10 or 20 or 30 people working on, or 50 people working on, or eventually 150 people working on, who knows. In those ones, you want them to be very standardized. Like, this is how we do it. On little shows of like 6 people or 8 people that thought the farmer's market would be cool to cover or whatever, you want that thing, let them experiment, let them play around, let them put things in all the different ways, because we'll go, oh, I never thought of that. And then that becomes part of the big standard. So you want little boats running out there doing crazy stuff, and then the big, aircraft carriers coming through that don't have a lot of trim. Go ahead, Noah.
This is so interesting and exciting to me. The way I look at it, the S-curve kind of analogy, going back to like traditional integration and when stuff gets moved through the food chain or pipeline, right? So we're currently at the innovation stage, right? The pioneering of like creating a system like from the ground up. And yes, I know Keith Lee has mentioned like we are pulling things from other mediums, right? Whether it's sports or news or whatever it is. Yes, there are things that are similar, but we're also doing something that's also kind of new. So we're still in that pioneering early stage, right? And over time, to Chris's point, I completely agree. We will be moving to kind of that second stage, or what I would call like a management type stage, where you have a system in place that you're basically managing and repeating. Mm-hmm. And then what also is going to happen is, instead of 100 hours of prep work, it goes down to 10. And then, a few iterations later, or even probably, dozens of projects later, we go from 10 hours of prep to like an hour of prep, so we'll basically condense until we have a refined system that works repeatedly.
Yeah. I mean, in other things that I've worked on, we kind of consider it 5 stages of a project. So the first one is concentration. The first one's formulation, and we're kind of still in formulation, which is that you are figuring it out, and it is super important to get formulation working, to make that, because it will drive everything else that goes forward. Concentration is really defined by the fact that you're putting a ton of energy into something, and then a little drop comes out the other end. So concentration is you're working through all these things. Things aren't working. Things are harder than you expected. Everything else is problematic. So concentration is there. Then you through concentration, you end up in stability. And stability is you're getting it done. Like, when you expect it to get done, it's an even amount of work, and you expect it to get done, and you have stability. The next step from there is momentum. And momentum, we are not there yet. So momentum is it's the opposite of concentration. Concentration is a ton of effort and a little output. Momentum is a little output and a little effort and a lot of output. And so you get to momentum you have to get through each one of these to get to the next one. Like, you can't, if you skip one, you're just going to end up somewhere. You'll end up having to go back and sort that one out later. And the final one is mastery. So once you get to a point where you have momentum, you can now start really focusing on the small bits and pieces and figuring those things out. And this is kind of the 5 that a lot of us pay attention to of how to make that work. And you want to think about where you are in that pipeline, and you do not want to any skipping just means you're going to have to go back and deal with that other one again.
Whoops, you just went out. You just went mute.
Which is most general to most specific. So the first part of your naming convention should be the most general thing, like it's office hours or whatever. And then it's it'll be the event, and then it'll be the subset of that event. You're building a file structure inside the naming convention. The second thing is that you rarely use 2 characters and never use more than 4. So, 5 on the outside, but really you try to say 4. So it's 4 characters for everything. So you basically don't have any words. You usually first cut out the vowels and then shorten everything up, and you make sure it doesn't create an acronym you don't want to show a client. And then so it's basically XXX underscore XXX underscore XXX. You always want underscores because Windows doesn't read periods very well. Anyway, so and it's like this. We always use the same number for everything that goes down. That way, when you look at the list, they all line up. The advantage of doing general to specific is that when you look at a list again, it groups everything just in the file lists that as you go through it. And then the last thing is that always use a year and go year, month, day instead of the opposite. That way everything searches correctly. Again, lists correctly. Anyway, that's my 2 cents. That's all I'm going to say. You guys can do it any way you want, but that's the ILM naming convention. And almost every company that I know that does large amounts of files uses something that is very, very similar. Go ahead. And they all start with something else, and they always end up there. Go ahead, Noah.
I think what you said is really well said. The last quote I'll give is, I think it's a Bill Gates quote, is basically when you scale up a business, you magnify its weaknesses, right? So we need to address those things early on and try to set us up for success long term.
And again, the best thing is that we just want to always keep in mind that we are failing forward. Like that is where you want, and this is the place we get to do this. You don't get to do this in real life very often. You have clients that want refunds, and they're all upset and they're all mad about whatever isn't working and everything else. The fact that we're doing this on our own time means that we get to do it, there. So sorry, my you'll see me turn green here in a second while someone else is talking. I have to reset something. This is why I don't. Why aren't you making your telestrator available? See this right here, that cursor, the cursor that you see wandering around. That's why I don't make my telestrator.
You're cursed.
Yet. I'm cursed. Yeah. Next question.
Cursed. Noah Sargent, Fullerton, California. I know NAMM and Cine are on the title, but Alex, do you have any updates for WWDC?
Yeah, we didn't do another one this week because last week we just didn't get a lot of questions. So I figured, there's no reason to do a whole nother hour on WWDC, but it's going really well. So we've got a great evening that we're going to do. We've got during the day on Monday, we're going to have the second hour. We'll talk about we'll talk about what we think is going to happen. We'll take a little bit of break between 9 and 10, but that'll be and we're going to turn it off actually, and then turn it back on a little bit before 10 o'clock to start this. I don't want to have it be one really long YouTube thing. So we will turn off and we'll turn it on. Actually, we'll turn it on right again so that there's like a pre-show and everyone can keep on talking. I have to run out for a minute to do some stuff after that. But then at 10 o'clock, we're going to all be talking about it and covering it. And basically the panelists are going to, and by the way, for panelists, this is important. And I'll be working with Mickey to make sure mine's all working, but it's really important for you to have comms working. So I know that we've been kind of working through that, and you can't join Monday at 10 o'clock without having comms because we're passing the audio of the keynote to our ears through comms, not through Zoom. So if you don't have comms working, you won't be able to, we're not passing it into Zoom. This is because this is the first time we're not doing it in after hours. We're doing it in office hours. And we don't want to pump that. That's a violation of the terms of service, and so we don't want to pump that into YouTube. So you'll see the keynote in our view, the panelist view. We'll see the keynote and we'll hear it through Unity Comms. but it won't show for the folks that are watching. So if you're going to come and watch at 10 o'clock, you need to have another device or another window open so that you can watch it. And this is a second ear experience. And the reason that we're doing this is because number one is it gives us a single version of the truth, which is that we all know where we are in the keynote, as opposed to what's been happening where someone's going, yeah, and we're like 20 seconds behind them, and it kind of ruins the show. So we're basically experimenting with this new idea of being able to do this all at one time. So we have that's happening at 10 o'clock in the morning, and then later in the evening, we've got our own Adam Toe, and is going to be here from Mix Effect Pro, as well as Justine and Renee and myself and Ayur, who's he was on last year. He's from the Audio Kit team, and so it was a little bit more focused this year. I felt like we had a lot of panelists on the first night of last year, and so we'll be covering that. That's just us. We'll be covering that experience in the evening, and then but we'll still be asking, having everybody here ask questions. It should be a pretty geeky thing, and then on Tuesday morning we'll be covering video. Wednesday, and we've got developers. We're starting to line up for each one of those, so it'll be the entire panel talking about it. So audio and video updates in WWC. Wednesday will be AR and 3D, and we've got some developers again that specialize in these things, jumping on and joining us as part of these discussions. And then Thursday is kind of a catch-all, and so it's a pretty complete set of stuff that. And I will say that the people may may wonder why we're spending so much time on it. We added more people to our mailing list last year than anything we've ever done. Like in 1 week, so it's proven to be a popular thing to do. It's being promoted it's on the Apple developer site. So it's a thing. Go ahead, Noah.
Alex, would you give any predictions or probabilities for VR, AR, anything like that?
I think that there's about an 80% chance we're going to see AR kit or AR OS. I think that they're going to probably preview something where they're doing that. I don't know what that's going to mean. I'd say 80% at best, maybe 60%. I think that there is a 20% chance that we'll see headset, that's going to do something. I think that's probably unlikely. The only reason they would do that is so that developers have time to make things. There's some point where you want to give the developers enough time to build things to make it great when you buy it. The ecosystem is really an issue, for all of these platforms. And so putting out a developer version of it would be useful, but I don't know if they're going to go down that path. But I think it'll be exciting. I think that there's a lot of moving parts. I wouldn't be surprised if we don't see more work in immersive audio and video and so on and so forth that they're working on. And so, we'll have to see. It should be a fun Monday. But yeah, we'll be talking about it a lot. All right, next question.
Roscoe Jones in Brea, California up next. What's the optimal field team size? Does the type of event being covered affect this? And what are the basic roles in the field that need to be covered?
Go ahead, Noah.
So optimal is the key word there. I think it's at least 3. So you have an on-camera person, which we're calling a field reporter. We have some sort of technical operator, which was going to be, camera operator in our case. That will probably be Roscoe and myself switching back and forth. And then the third person would be some sort of producer who's thinking ahead and prepping the next thing. And that's per team, right? So that's kind of like a bundle of people. I would love to have at least 2 teams at every event. And the reason for that is when one team's moving, you're ready with the next team, that kind of thing. But we'll see how that shakes out. And Roscoe's going to be a part of our wonderful ground crew.
Yeah, and when we talk about optimal, I would say that from my experience, it's been the thing we start. 3 is exactly correct as far as the base team. When we get another person, we have a tendency to make them a audio engineer, so someone who's just managing audio, and that cleans up a bunch of issues. When we add another person, they tend to be an all-purpose PA that's going to just get things done for us. When we add another person to these, we have a forward producer that goes to the next booth and basically tells people we're coming, and there's, and a lot of times it's not a PA, it's another producer. It's someone who can very forcefully or not forcefully, but very clearly tell the person at the booth, see that person over there? That person's streaming live. They're streaming live to about 300 people. So they represent 300 people that are about to walk to your booth. Is there someone they can talk to? Is there, do you have it? And we sometimes schedule that ahead of time and we tell them that there's something going on. But a lot of times we've literally just walked over, and you'd be surprised that when people have the opportunity to speak to 300 people, how many people they'll just walk away from that they were talking to, because, it's a much bigger pie. And so that forward producer. And then the last two that we've added in the past to Macworld and other things are blocking. So basically what happens is that when we have, you have the person covering, and then you have the camera here, and then you have your, audio engineer here and your producer over here. We'll say we have our forward over here and a PA that's running off and getting things done. And then we'll put two people right here. And they are literally there to block traffic. And they have to be ready to be assertive. People will want to walk through, and they literally just open up their hands. Nope. And people will be, there are occasionally some people that don't like to be told what to do, and they'll push through, but they look really bad when they do it on air, but we've definitely done that very effectively, where you have two and sometimes more. When we had a lot of volunteers for Macworld coverage with Pixel Core, we would have people that look more casual because there's like two of them on each side. But yeah, they would just open up their arms and go like, yeah, we're shooting here. So just move on. And again, 99% of the time, someone would just walk around, and then you'd always have that one person who doesn't like to be told what to do. And that tells us a lot about them. All right, next question.
Jonas Natal, Stuttgart, Germany. Is there a back-end room planned where people can listen to the comms of the event?
Go ahead, Noah.
So as of this point, we do not have that set up. Unless I'm wrong, Dennis, you can correct me on that. But I think if somebody is interested in listening, please reach out, and we'll get you in our system. That's not really an open thing currently, but it might be something we'll introduce in the future.
Go ahead, Dennis.
Put it on Clubhouse.
Yeah, exactly. Go ahead, Dennis.
Yeah, it would be lovely to be able to feed it into after hours or something, because we had talked about doing that for office hours previously. The issue here, I think, mostly will be the fact that we have so many different PLs in the comms. We're trying to keep comms clear, particularly for the TD who's being called. So they need a dedicated channel for that. And then the showrunner will have a separate dedicated channel. The graphics team have their own channel. So it's a question of what you want to listen to more than anything.
Yeah, and we'll work on that. I don't know if JJ's in the back end, and if we can make it work, I'm happy to open something up where we run all the comms, just turn them all on, just run them all into a thing where you can just watch the show and listen to all the comms going on. I want that to be part of the production process. I feel like we want to get to a point where every show we do, you have access to the comms, that because no one gets to listen to those. No one gets to hear how that's working. And it's a really valuable piece of learning content, is to learn what didn't work or how this actually got done. So I'm happy to do any of those things. And I am open in the future. We won't be able to do it on this one. I'd be happy to buy a bunch of B-Links and have them all, 6 of them, jump into those PLs, and each one of them is set to a different listen mode, and then each one of them joins as an interpreter into a thing. So you could just turn on. We would just name the interpretations as the different things that you want to listen to, and you could listen to any one of those comms if you like, or just listen to all of them. So all of that could be a doable thing. Go ahead, Noah.
Yeah, I like how you broke it out. That was my question, is how it would work from a structural standpoint, because there are several times where if you have more than 3 or 4 comms, like PLs open, that it's just chaos. Like you can't listen to more.
I'm fine with that for now, though. I mean, just listening to it, I don't think it'll be that much chaos. And I think that you hear that there's chaos. You'll just hear all the different things that are going on. So I don't have any problem with just turning them all on and leaving them up. You guys can decide what you want to do, but I'm just saying that I think that we should be figuring out. One of the things we should be doing as we work on event coverage is figure out how people listen to all the comms, in different ways.
I definitely agree, and I like how you basically said you can have the bots in there so that you can choose which channel you listen to. But if you only had everything on all the time, I think you can try it for the show. I think it's going to be too much because there's so many people on the back end.
I think we should try it.
Let's
just
do
see
it.
what happens. Yeah, exactly. And just see what happens. Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. I'm a big proponent for doing the assign interpreter, and then that PL would be on that. In the drop down, you just pull, you can rename them whatever you want. Yeah. So normally it's Spanish, Russian, all these different languages. You can rename it TD channel, program channel, and then they can drop down. But the backend is hosted on a webinar platform through Zoom. So anybody can come in if they're given the link. And I'm a huge proponent for the learning of everybody to be able to see and hear what's going on and be anonymous if they don't want to be in there with their name. They're just kind of watching behind the scenes. I think it should be wide open. This secretive stuff just boggles my mind as to why it isn't just anybody that's watching the show can see it. I mean, and hear it and listen and learn.
Yeah. Yep. Go, Bill.
Would it be hard or trivial to ISO and record those tracks for later? I agree, mixing it for the show, even if it gets confusing, but it'd be great if you could do that and then output a multi-track QuickTime or something that had the individual channels. So if you needed to hear that call was.
Once we separated out those PLs, we could absolutely record them because now they theoretically are just on Dante, and so we could just pull those, we could just route those as Dante channels and capture all of them. I think that I've thought about that a fair bit recently because listening to Marcia call a show like a concert, it's artwork, and it is incredibly valuable to hear someone who's done thousands of shows, thousands of concerts call a concert, and we're going to do that in the not too distant future. And I definitely think that we should be, with her permission, I don't think she's going to care, record those so that you can watch, because what I'd love to do is have you be able to watch the show. And I think that's really valuable is to see what we see, which is the multi-view. Like I want to record the multi-view and her comms so that you can just watch the multi-view and the comms together so that you can see how she's setting things up and doing this. Because I think Chris can attest that, Chris and I both cut the show for her while she's doing that. And it's been really valuable.
It's super cool.
Yeah.
And it's just honestly educational. Yes. Also very fun.
Yeah.
I mean, if you like music, it's a great way to experience a band. I've always said, I'd much rather watch a good concert film than go to the show because I spend all that money. I stand in all those lines. I only get to see it from one camera angle, the seat I'm in.
That's usually the bad camera angle if you don't have enough money. That's really far away. Yeah, exactly. I mean, I have to admit, I get the opportunity for a variety of reasons to watch a lot of shows through multi-view, and comms. Like I get to listen to a lot of comms and see a lot of very big shows and little shows and everything else just because of the stuff I'm doing. And I'm a little ADD. I find it much easier to watch shows in multi-view format with comms. Like I can still get the whole show, but I actually find it much more interesting because it keeps me busy like while I'm doing it. So
I can't remember who said it, but it was one of those nights when I came up and I cut one of the shows for you. Somebody said, Guy, I feel like I'm standing in the wings just watching a show at a festival, because it's a different, more intimate way of seeing it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Next question.
Next one comes from Jack Cannon in Phoenix, Arizona. Excited to see NAMM coverage. What's the next project Office Hours will be taking on?
Go ahead, Noah.
So NAMM is obviously coming up first. It's going to be Saturday, Sunday, right? Alex talked about WWDC, which is Monday and throughout the week
Monday
as well.
through Thursday, yeah.
Thank you. And then Cinegear is going to be the next weekend. So that's going to be June 6th through 9th. I think we're only streaming Saturday, though, for that event. Now,
I think it's Saturday the 11th.
Oh, okay.
Yes,
9 through 12. Yeah, you're right. Excuse me. And then after that, we do have a few folks who've asked about events. Like there's the EAA Air Venture Oshkosh in July, and then there's a CSUN Assisted Technologies Convention in March. Those are the things that need to go through our pipeline and figure out the interest. I'm pretty confident we're going to cover the Assisted Technologies show because that's in March of 2023. But we need to know who's interested in the air show or any other events that are coming up. That way we can put them on the calendar. And it's also, like we mentioned before, a commitment on the crew and a commitment in leadership. And so I know personally it's going to depend on where it lands because I've been a little overcommitted lately. So
Oshkosh, I'm in. Gosh. That's all I got to say. Bill, real quick.
I was just going to say, Cinegear, it's downsized from where it used to be. It used to be on the back lot at Paramount, and it's going to be in the convention center this year. So it's going to be a little more traditional looking. So I think it's going to be a smaller version of what we did at NAB, and there are some different things happening. Just because I'm not sure whether the show is going to be widely attended or not. We'll see.
Yeah, as far as next projects, if there's interest in SIGGRAPH or SIGGRAPH I believe it's in Vancouver. Again, if there's a commitment to do it in our early August, that would be one that we're looking at. We're also looking very keenly at IBC, and that depends on our European members and whether they want to be boots on the ground for that. And then the one that I'm focused on a lot is the NAB New York. What's nice about NAB New York is that it's small and compact compared to it's like a tenth the size of the big NAB. It's in Javits. It has been in Javits Center in the past, and so but it's relatively compact and easy to cover. So I think that that would be, and has the AES oftentimes is at the same time. So that would be the one that I think that we really want to focus on. If we only did one more this year, that would be the one that we'd cover. But if our friends in Europe want to do IBC, let us know, and we should get ahead of it and start doing research. Next question.
Eddie Scott, Mission Viejo, California. I'm going to NAMM this weekend. Do you have any last-minute needs?
Go ahead, Noah.
Sure. Yeah, we'd love to have you, Eddie. So just for anybody else who might be going to NAMM or Cinegear, reach out to us right away. The thing we'll need from you is just a confirmation on your time frame, right? So we're going live Saturday and Sunday. So in those windows that we're live, like that's the time we'll need the most support. We are doing a rehearsal, and this is for everybody who's helping. Rehearsals Friday at 3:30 p.m. and I'll be boots on the ground with whoever else is available to test with the real equipment in the real setting, because the floor is open at that time, and that's why we have that time. And then for our backend team, I know they're doing continuous rehearsals with Mukana and the different setups. So make sure you're paying attention to that as well if you want to be involved. But ultimately, reach out to myself or Josh, and we'll get you in the system.
Next question.
Next one comes to us from Guy Cochran in Seattle. What's the camera, audio, and transmission method for NAMM and or Cinegear? And will boots on the ground have IEM or in-ear monitor communication?
Go ahead, Noah.
Yeah, so the camera will be my iPhone 13. I have a personal and a work phone, right? So I'll have comms in one, and then we're shooting on the other. So that's going to be going also with a dongle. That's going to give us wired Ethernet, which will go to our Mr. Net device. It also has a USB port, which will have the Mix Pre as a USB interface. So we'll be able to take in XLR audio. And so Bill has kindly sent a transmitter for us, and I have an MD46 handheld mic, which we'll be comparing with the SM58 to see which handheld's going to be best on the floor. And then finally, it does have a charger as well, which will charge our whole system. So that's going to be our hardware. As far as returns or in-ear IMs for our boots on the ground, we are going to test for NAMM to see if we can get a return through the Mix Pre. It's headphone out. I have an adapter which we'll use with a wireless X Vive transmitter system, so that will be our in-ears, and so we have a few of those that every crew member can have to hear the return, minus their comms, which will be in their personal devices as well. So hopefully that covers it.
Next question.
Dennis Champion Walker, Mansfield, UK. Josh, can you talk about the Mukana voting tags?
Go ahead, Josh. Sorry.
Yeah, so we are going to be starting to take in the questions the day of. So after we finish our office hours, we'll be going right into into our regular. You'll be able to comment on a regular office hours Mukana. So it's very important that you be able to tag your questions with the appropriate tag. If you go into Discord, you can vote as to what tags you want us to create. There'll be multiple tags as to normally we have just a first hour and our second hour tag. We'll have multiple tags that are person, places, or things. If you input those and vote them up, we'll create them ahead of time so you can ask those questions. There will be limited creation of tags on the day of. We'll make some, but they'll be limited as to how many we have, so not overcrowd the system. So encourage you to go to Discord and enter your tags and vote up which ones that you want us to focus on.
All right. Yeah, lights. I know it's about audio, but I hear there's a lot of lights. Next question.
Next question comes to us from Michael Bosbein, Woodstock, Georgia. NAMM, still not sure how you plan to focus the coverage. There are exhibitors from all over the world in 8 big halls and 2 hotels.
Go ahead, Noah.
Yeah, that's what's interesting about these large conventions and shows is there are a lot of things to see, a lot of things to do. So excellent question, Michael. So I'll kind of try to refine how we're looking at the show. We have different building blocks which make up the show in its entirety, right? So we'll have pre-produced packages which will help kind of give us a break and give us some history and give us some insight at specific moments of the show. We're going to have anchors, right? People like we're doing now with panelists that will talk and kind of fill between segments, and then we'll also have the boots on the ground team, right? So those are the folks who are going to be interviewing either experts or having a stand-up, man on the street type stuff directly to us, telling us what the product that we're covering, what we're talking about. And really the run of show is kind of like a backbone to our infrastructure, but it also gives us that flexibility. And that's one of the things we need to retain with our show flow is that flexibility, because schedules change and people are suddenly unavailable, or we might have to adapt and move. So we do want to create some space for that movement, but ultimately the questions from Mukana are going to determine like who we talk to or who do we try to talk to and who we seek out, followed by the field team and their interest, right? So George might have a specific person that he knows he wants to talk to, but at the end of the day, it's what we can get and who we can talk to and what products we can show.
Yeah, and the thing to think about is that we're experimenting. We're just trying to figure out how to cover a show right now, and covering all of it is not really the priority as much as covering what makes sense at the moment. And we're trying to figure out the model, and the only way to figure it out is to do it. I think that one thing that's a real danger is to get caught up in trying to do everything that we want to do all at one time. So we're doing the best we can over a couple of hours. I believe that there'll be some day in the future where we start covering it the day before, we cover it every single day. It runs all day. It runs into the evening, 2 or 3 years in the future. And it's, and the folks, we fly people in and put them up in hotels and, get hotel blocks and do all the things that we know how to do. And I think that that's a future that is somewhere in the future. But right now this is baby steps. This is the first, the first step forward of us figuring out there's no way to get there without doing what we're doing right now. And so it's a great adventure. Next question.
Robin Cutshaw in Atlanta, Georgia, unafraid to ask the real questions of the day for Josh Kaufman. Is your favorite color green?
Go ahead, Josh.
Close. It's alpha, my favorite color.
Allows you to separate the important things from the background. I think that's an excellent answer. All right. Thank you so much. Thanks to our producers for all the great questions. Again, one of those, beginning of the hour. We're not sure if everyone's interested in doing this, but we filled it up. And thanks to the panelists, we can't do this without you. And a great discussion. Really excited about NAMM. So it's going to be really interesting to see how this goes. So thanks to the production team that's working on NAMM and Cinegear, as well as the production crew that does this every day. Just really amazing work. And now we're going to jump into After Hours. I think maybe we're thinking about it. Yeah.
800 shows down. Wow.
800. Episode 800. We're going to hit 1,000 before the end of the year. Just think about that.
Are we at 10,000 mistakes yet?
Oh, I think we passed that at like 600. I think we did that. In fact, we might have passed the 10,000 mistakes. 200.